Hi folks, it's Matt here from the Ask the Arb podcast. Before we get stuck into today's podcast, I'd just like to ask you a favour. If you've ever got any value from this podcast, you could do us a massive favour by going to wherever you get your podcasts from and subscribing to the show and leaving us a review. You can also follow us on Instagram at go-rover, and that would be fantastic. So let's jump right into today's. So folks, today I am absolutely delighted to welcome onto the Ask the Arb podcast Ewan MacGregor. Now, we've had a few technical issues with the start of this podcast, so the first 2 minutes are missed, but what I would like to say to you is that I haven't managed to pull a blinder here and got a Hollywood A-lister onto the podcast. However, Ewan is a A-list celebrity in Scottish construction. So Ewan MacGregor is going to be on the podcast in a moment. We're going to jump right in just after he has told us all about his early years. So way back in the distant past, Ewan was down in the central belt of Scotland studying at the University of West Scotland for a BSc in construction management. Following that, Ewan went through a number of construction roles before his wife, who was a doctor, got offered a position up in the Scottish Highlands, and we join Ewan just as he arrives in Inverness.
Several members of family have said, why don't you move back to Central Belt? But it's not happening.
No.
We're here, we'll be staying here.
No. I've been in the Highlands, I think, 10 years now, something like that. Well, that's how we met initially, wasn't it? It was your
you
brother.
Need to work in your accent, though.
Yeah. Oh, I know. It's tough. It's my son. I keep my youngest son, James, he's just turned 7. And he 1 week he's Scottish, next week he's not. I keep telling him he's first generation Scottish. Yeah, we're working on it. So you're up in the Highlands, and did you instantly go into running your own business?
No. So when we moved up here, I carried on. I was with a company called BAM, which is still on the go, a huge international company. And for the first few months, I worked in Edinburgh and just commuted up on a Friday afternoon, went back down on Monday, and then got a job up here working at Doonray, which was a civils company, big civils company, well known, but they were doing building. And I started in December. The original project manager on the job was buried the week before I started. Cancer. And it went downhill from there. So I gave it a few months and then did various things. Worked for a steel company, ran their construction contracts throughout the UK. And then wife became pregnant with her second child, but it was a difficult pregnancy, so I had to be home. And I got a job with Robertson Group. Oh, right, yeah. And we built the SNH headquarters in Inverness. So I was a project manager for that. And then when I left there, that's when I set up my own company. I mean, that's a fantastic building, isn't it? It is, yeah. It's must be getting on for 16, 17 years old. Cool. I guess. I was up there with my other half, Katrina, the other day, and we walked up the hill up there. I'd not been up to Craig Dunane, I don't think, since we did a roof survey there for Jim at Kane Tech years and years ago when we first got into drones. Modelled the roof of the old hospital there, and that's the first time I've been up there since all that work's completed. It's quite the change there now. Well, that building, the SNH headquarters, that had the highest BREEAM rating of any building in the UK for a couple of years. Really? Yeah, it was. We broke a lot of moulds on that one. Yeah. Just the way, because we had a high amount of renewable materials in it, or there was a lot of analysis, daylights, calculations, daylight penetration into the building, natural heating, cooling via the windows, a whole pile of stuff that hadn't really been done before. So yeah, there's a lot of ground broken on that. That's fantastic. Yeah, it's a real landmark. You can see that right the way around the city. And it's funny, it blends really well into the hillside, doesn't it? Yeah. It's not until you get up close to it you realise what a building is. We're building a visual picture there of something that most people listening to this are going to have no idea what we're talking about. So I'll have to pop a link in the description there. So
now, tell me about your role now and what kind of things that you do within your daily realm.
So I set up Helica, mainly as a project management business, and we do that. We've kind of gone into doing Clerk of Works quality control, and we do a lot of quality control work for Highland Council, the Housing Alliance, Highland Housing Alliance, Cairn Housing Association. We've done private work as well, but the Housing Association and Highland Council are the biggest clients that we have.
Yeah.
We're doing work in Edinburgh as well at the moment, but quality control is probably the biggest part of it. Compliance with design, compliance with specification, that side of things. We also CDM advisors, so construction design and management regulations, which applies to any construction project in the UK, and that includes domestic construction, which a lot of people think it doesn't apply to, but it does. And also we do principal designer, so if your construction project has more than one contractor on site, you must have a principal designer and a principal contractor, so we can fulfil the principal designer role, and then, as I say, project management as well.
Why do you think people get themselves into such a mess, particularly the smaller schemes, when it comes to CDM and Clerk of Works and that kind of thing?
The CDM side, it's amazing. I know professional property developers, or a couple of them, where I've spoken to them, and they said, "Oh, this project's too small." In fact, one of them was a building very close to here, and they were re-kitting it out inside. And I said, "How are you covering all the CDM stuff?" "Oh, it's too small, it doesn't apply to us." Actually, yes, it does. Just because it's not notified doesn't mean the regulations don't apply. So a lot of some of it's willful ignorance, I think.
Yeah.
People don't want to know. And that, but on the whole, house builder or house owners or domestic clients just don't really know, because their designers never explain it to them, and they don't really. You know, if you don't know, you don't know. How do you know to go and look for it if nobody told you? They called the CDM, the Clerk of Works. We've just been asked. We were asked by one particular client if we could help keep an eye on Clerk of Works type role for one of their projects, and we did that and realised that what they were getting from us was way better and more information than they were getting from the previous. And then from that point on, we've done pretty much all their work and morphed into the Highland Council as well and Cairn Housing Association.
That's often the way, isn't it? When you identify a hole in someone else's project delivery, something you can do a little bit cleaner, a little bit better. And I mean, time after time after time, we have a similar role within arboricultural Clerk of Works, and it's specified within the arboricultural method statement. And what generally happens is a client, doesn't matter the size of the scheme, they will get their planning consent through, and there's nearly always a planning condition on there that they have to appoint the arboricultural Clerk of Works
or ecological clerk
or ecological Clerk of Works. That's right, and that everything must comply with that report that had been provided some months ago, and some do, some don't. Quite often the cost of that is a barrier and a bit of a surprise, but quite often what tends to happen is that they don't come back to us for that piece of work until there's enforcement action threatened, i.e. the tree officer's gone out and has found that and then you're trying to unpick that mess. Does that same sort of thing happen on the building side of things?
Yeah, well, we've got on the ecological side of things just now, there's a project in the Highlands where the bat surveys and stuff were never done.
Right.
And this project is well on. And it's now coming back to bite because they're not going to be able to, how are they going to discharge that in the actual works of, houses are built.
Yeah.
So it's causing issues right now.
And
it wasn't done properly.
Bats, legally protected species.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's huge fines attached to it potentially as well. But I think the local authorities are becoming a bit more, some people think, well, they'll never check or we won't bother with dealing with that, it'll go away. But it doesn't go away, or you're taking a big chance if you don't just deal with it up front and get it.
Absolutely.
Get the conditions purified as soon as possible. Some of them you can't purify straight away. You have to do it during the build or prior to occupation, but you have to keep a tracker of these things. quite often you'll have 20 or 30 conditions.
Yeah.
And if you don't track them, then it's too easy for them to get forgotten about, and then you might have a project that's ready for occupation and you can't do it because you haven't purified the relevant conditions.
Yeah, and I don't think people realise quite how often that scenario arises as well. Does seem to be a general thinking that once you've got that decision notice in your hand, almost regardless of the size of the project, you can just crack on with it. There's a house builder that we work with that had some conditions in place for some additional surveys to be carried out, and it all centred around the access and egress point to this job. So they knocked the road through, completely trashed all the trees, and then came to us to discharge the condition. And you just, well, there's nothing, we just literally cannot help you. And there was another one. It does work the other way as well. So quite often what will happen is the local authority, if the planning officer has got a reasonable clue of what's going on, they might push the application through, put on a planning condition for a method statement and a tree protection plan to be provided before any works commence on site to protect off-site trees or even on-site trees. So you get this planning condition for something that is it's totally unbuildable. So we had one recently. It was a demolition and rebuild. It was a commercial premises that was going to be knocked down. They were going to rebuild a residential unit right up to the site boundary, and there was a linear feature of off-site protected trees. They put a condition on for a method statement and a tree protection plan. Came to us for a fee to discharge it. They accepted our fee, sent over all the plans and stuff, and I had a look at it and I said, well, there's nothing we can do. You're building right up to the boundary, right through all the roots of the trees. The trees overhang the development site. There was literally no way it could be constructed with the trees in place. And worse still, the windows for the new residential units faced directly onto the stem of the tree. So there was no view. So where's that fallen down? You know, I mean, that wasn't just the planning that's fallen down. That was at the design. So it's just everything. Yeah. And you just say, how does this happen, you know?
Just a lack of thought or something.
But I was speaking to somebody earlier on, and they were saying to me that we need to change our language around get through planning. That's the wrong kind of language. You know, we should be doing everything in the right order, starting very on in the process, making sure all the boxes are ticked. So
it's funny. A lot of people looking in from the outside want planning to be complied with because they don't want everything. But when planning actually applies to your project, you shouldn't have to bother with it.
That's a brilliant point.
You know, it's funny how people change their mindset depending on whether they're the ones making the application.
Yes.
Or not.
I was looking at putting in a home gym at home, and it looked like we could probably do it under permitted development.
Looks like you need it.
Yeah. Thank you. And then we realised that in order to lift any weights above your head, you'd need additional height, and it wasn't going to happen. And knowing what I know about certain local authorities, etc., I just decided that we weren't going to bother with that at all. Unless we dug down, I suppose we could maybe get away with that.
Well, you're allowed 3 metres to the eaves and 4 to the ridge with development.
I think it was too close to the boundary. That was the problem. However, the neighbour has built a large building in their back garden without any planning consent whatsoever. But anyway, we digress. So if somebody out there has they've just received their planning consent, let's say it's a mid-sized development, the kind of development that would benefit from your services onwards, at what stage should they be coming to you and getting you involved in a kind of CDM or clerk of works role?
If it's CDM, we should be there right from the off.
Yeah.
So from project inception, if you read the regulations, that they apply from project inception. Doesn't always happen. Quite often we'll get a phone call saying, can you do CDM advisor or whatever, or principal designer on this, and say, right, okay, where are you with it? Oh, we've got planning, we've got building work. I think, well, you know, you're pretty well on in the process then, because the whole point of the CDM regulations is reviewing design. It's designing out risk. If the design's complete, then we've got no input into designing out that risk. It's already designed into the building. If there is any, I mean, you would hope that the architects, the engineers, the designers they're aware of the regulations, that they've looked at that and they have designed out work at height if possible, or putting windows in funny places above stairs and things like that. And they've thought about maintaining the building afterwards in a safe manner. So ideally at the beginning, but we don't live in an ideal world, and quite often we come in later on than we should do.
And do you find clients are generally receptive to the solving of those issues when you come in later on? Or do you become a point of conflict?
It's usually a fait accompli at that point. What you tend to find is that the architects and the engineers know, and they know what they should and shouldn't be doing in the whole. And most of the things that we're involved with are residential, so it's relatively straightforward. If you were doing some multi-storey, one in Inverness, funnily enough, a couple of years ago, which was flats, solar panels. We had a discussion. We were brought in again later than we would like to have been. Solar panels on the roof, no parapet, so unsafe system was included, but which isn't the ideal scenario. But there was a planning restriction on the height of the building, so that kind of dictated to a certain extent where the. But if we'd been involved early, we could have maybe helped to look and design some of that out.
Yeah.
As far as the Clerk of Works side of things is concerned, it depends on who the client is. So with the Housing Alliance, we're usually involved fairly early on, where we get copies of the plans and layouts, and we'll do a review of all them to make sure that they comply with what's called firm foundations, which is a Highland Council Housing Alliance specification type document. Socket positions, all that sort of stuff. We'll mark up the drawings with the clients, and then they go back to the design team for them to alter before it all gets signed off. So we, not right at the beginning in that case, but usually once there's a sort of scheme in place, and then prior to it being finally signed off, then we're usually involved at that point.
So the one thing that we do see quite a lot, even on quite reasonable size schemes sometimes, particularly demolition and rebuild, residential demolition and rebuild, is kind of DIY project management. What do you think where are the maybe not so hidden, but where are the risks around DIY project management? What are the kind of things that people tend to miss when they're looking to manage something themselves?
When you say DIY, I mean, I take it you're not talking about putting up shelves, you're talking about building a house.
Yes.
So what you have to watch, if you're building your own house and you're employing a contractor to build the work, to do the work for you, then you're in the clear pretty much as far as the CDM regulations are concerned, because the regulations fall on the principal contractor, or if you've appointed the principal designer, If you are taking and you're going to manage the joiners, the brickies, the electricians, the plumbers, and all these people yourself, the CDA, the Health and Safety Executive will view you as the principal contractor potentially. And that's where you've got to watch, because then you could be taking on some liabilities that you might not be aware of. The last time I was on an update course for the CDM regulations, the instructor on that course was saying it would be very difficult for the HSE to enforce that on you as a private owner of your own, building your own house.
Yeah.
If you're building your house and you're going to be letting it out as a bed and breakfast or some sort of Airbnb, that's under a business, so then the regulations without a doubt apply to you. So it depends on your circumstances.
And that's an interesting point, because I don't know how common it is now, but certainly in years gone by, it was quite common for somebody to set up Matt and Ewan Construction Limited so they could claim back the VAT on their materials, etc., etc. So they could be opening themselves right up to issues.
Yeah, you've got to watch. So long and short of it is, if it's in the furtherance of a business, then CDM regulations will apply to you, even if you're going to live in the house, but it's still furtherance of a business. Then you've got to be careful. If it's purely for you and your family to live in, they still apply, but it's how rigidly they would be enforced if the HSE did get involved.
No, that's really, really useful. Thanks for that. Some interesting little background there, which may save people some expense in the future. So as we move towards the end of this, I wanted to ask you one last question. Are you still into the cycling? Are you?
I have been building my own project for the last year.
Excuses.
My weekends have been taken up. In fact, I just laid the last slabs at the weekend.
Yeah.
So I haven't been on my bike since last May.
No.
No.
Where's the best place to go biking in the Highlands?
Up just anywhere. I just go south of Nairn and it's all uphill.
Yeah.
So go way up onto Dava Moor, out towards Clava, out that way sometimes. Just depends. You go out and the thing is, you get up into the hills. By the time you've got to the top of a hill, a lot of your worries are...
Yeah.
It clears your head, it's great. And then depending how I'm feeling, I just keep going.
Yeah.
And some days it'll be 60, 70 miles. Sometimes it's just 20 miles, depending how much time I've got. But I've put my bike back together there last weekend. So now that the statutory is finished,
yeah,
I'll be getting out on the bike again.
Yeah, no excuses, no excuses. Yeah, I see there was a very large cycle race, wasn't there, in Inverness this weekend?
Yeah, the ETAP, which I've done the last few years, but I didn't sign up for this year because we were supposed to be in London last weekend, but we didn't go in the end. So, but I've done no training, so I would have. The hill coming out of Fort Augustus would have probably killed me. That is a killer. So for those that don't know, this is I think 64 miles. 64-mile cycle race in the Highlands of Scotland that leaves Inverness and it goes along the shore of Loch Ness down to a place called Fort Augustus, and then the climb from Fort Augustus up to the top end of Strathnairn is quite something, isn't it? It's a killer.
Yeah.
In fact, the last time I did it, there was a fella with the biggest calves I've ever seen from Yorkshire. And we were coming to Fort Augustus, we went up a little hill and he said, "Is this the big hill?" I went, "No." you'll know when you've hit it.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, there was a guy getting CPR on the hill as I cycled past. He was Australian lad, as it turned out. Fortunately, the guy who was doing CPR was one of the A&E doctors from Rigmore. So
that's handy.
Lucky,
yeah.
lucky.
Oh, it's worth it when you get to the top, though. We've done some filming up there on the other side of business on that little ridge, and it is probably one of my favourite spots. I regularly go up the south side of Strathnairn. I think it's one of the most underrated areas, close to Inverness.
Well, we've got a couple of projects in Fort William, so sometimes on the way back, if it's a nice day, I'll go that way just to change the route a wee bit. So.
And that's probably one of the best things about your job up here, isn't it? Is getting to travel around stunningly beautiful scenery.
Yeah, you go to Skye on a bad day or go to Skye on a horrible day and it's stunning regardless.
Yeah,
Same up north. Yeah,
we were on a development project on Rassay about 4 weeks ago, and it's hard to call it a job sometimes. So sorry for the London listeners, but there you go. Yeah. It's a beautiful spot. Yeah. So thanks a lot for coming in, Ewan. For those people that want to reach out to you and get in contact with you, what's the best way to do that?
The website is helicapm.com and my email address is ewan@helicapm.com. That's EWAN. And if anyone wants to get in touch, then please feel free.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot for coming in, Ewan. I will pop those links in the description, and we will speak to you soon.
Cheers.
You've been listening to Ask the ARB. Your host was Matt Harmsworth. To get your planning back on track, the next logical step is to go to www.go-roavr.co.uk right now and get your instant quote today.